Hello, welcome back to this Sonic Labs series where we're here with Tom Lonsborough, who is artist performing as 2 Billion Beats, also an Ableton certified trainer working with the Manchester MIDI School.
Manchester MIDI School, yep.
And one of the things that we've been looking at, or many of the things we've been looking at, are these kind of tips and tricks on how to use Ableton Live in a live situation. Tom, obviously one of the big deals is what happens when everything goes wrong? You know, how much preparation can you kind of have to make that as less painful as possible?
Well, you've got to sort of try and cover all bases. You don't want to look like an idiot, which I have done previously with an old band. And since then, before you go out and play anyway, you've just got to make sure that you've prepared for every eventuality. So I suppose in this video, I want to just consider what happens if any of the pieces of synthesizer or drum machine hardware goes bang, any of the MIDI controllers go bang, what happens if the computer goes bang, what happens if the audio interface or the MIDI interface goes bang. So there's a sort of lot of ground to cover, but they're all slightly different techniques. I suppose the first thing would be connectivity. So you need to rock up and be able to plug into whatever the sound guy or the venue has got. So got a few bits and pieces here. This might be one of the bits of kit that you take with you, a loom. Obviously the patch bay is jack, and often the sound guy will have a wall box that's got an XLR input on it. I've just got a jack to jack there, but I do also have a loom that's got jack at one end and male XLR at the other.
They might not have DIs, for instance. And yeah.
Might not have DIs. So yeah.
Probably won't have link leads, because I used to work as a house engineer at a club, and they were always the things that went missing. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if you're playing at like a venue that I suppose we often host, say, a band where they've just got a standard wall box, you know, with XLR inputs, you need something like that. But yeah, I suppose it depends on the venue and the sound guy. But other leads that you might need, we had to use this a couple of weeks ago when we were at Alfresco Festival, where we had to plug straight into a DJ mixer. So we had to, sum it down to just a stereo output, which is what we're using today. But then this had to go into one of the channels on the DJ mixer.
Right.
So yeah, I suppose if you're playing in a club and you're using this sort of setup, then you'd need something that's got an RCA connection on it. What else? Yeah, a really important one to consider. Obviously, unfortunately, you can't afford more than the one Motu audio interface. So what happens if the sound card goes down? The show's still got to go on. So in that instance, we've made provision to use the computer's headphone port, which we'll
not
cover
ideal,
in a minute.
But at least
not
you've
ideal,
got a show.
But again, so we've got every possible combination. We've got mini jack to male XLR. We've got mini jack to in case you need to go to the wall box. Mini jack to RCA, just in case you need to go to the DJ mixer. And mini jack to quarter-inch jack.
Yeah, I mean, it seems obvious, really, but quite often, something so insignificant could
and it has
drop the gig. Yeah.
I've been sort of rushing around at sound check looking for adapters, and whereas if you've just got every possible combination, all those together, it might be 50 quid with the cables, but
better than not doing the show.
Yeah. And the same goes for, this is all integrated in here, but I might often carry around just a couple of spare patch cables, a couple of USB cables, in all the variants, and then obviously got a Firewire 400 to 800 and an adapter, just one of everything in a sack underneath here, ready to, whip out if you need to swap any cables.
So that's
over.
the kind of hardware failure part of the hardware failure.
Part of the hardware failure. Next up, what happens if one or more of the pieces of hardware goes bang? So, for example, if the drum machine goes bang, you've got no rhythm. So this is the way that I do it, and I'm still trying to decide whether this is a really good way of doing it or a little bit convoluted, but maybe you might be able to help me out with this. If I just pick one loop from the first track, where are we? Let's go for that. Okay. So what happens if the bass goes bang and you're mid-set? you don't want to be without bass for the rest of the track. So, as you can hear, these are just loops that will just play indefinitely. Now, the way I've got things routed, we've got a MIDI track here, and all the MIDI track is doing is sending that note information out to the relevant port, to the Minotaur. So the Minotaur is connected to port 2. So you can see there's the MIDI on its way out. So actually, I can just fold that away. Those are my MIDI tracks. Now can you see, I've got an audio track here.
And that's processing the live input from the...
Yeah. So that's listening to, connection 7 on the Mo2. That's what I've connected the Minotaur up to inside the guts of this. So what I could do is arm the track, and then just make sure I'm in line with the correct scene. And record that, and if I need to obviously just give that a little boost level-wise, I could do. It's a little bit low, but that'll do. Okay, just hit the launch button again. That'll start to loop, but we won't hear it.
Why not?
The reason we're not going to hear it is because track monitor is set to in. If I just zoom in on that track a little bit, you see we've got these 3 buttons here: in, auto, and off. Now, because I've set that to in,
it's only listening to the live input.
It's listening to the live input, as opposed to any clip that's on the track. So if I just do that. Now if I turn the monitor to off, you hear it's listening to the recording that I've made. So if that were to go mid-set,
what do I do?
All we'd have to do is just drop the monitor to off.
And you'd at least have a representation of it. And if you'd done all, I guess if you'd done all the preparation beforehand and you had clips and all of those things, they'd just be ready to go in case everything was, or I suppose, you know, in some instances you might be doing a really small gig where it might be a PA and you kind of go, well, we can't take the rack. It's just you've got to stand there with a keyboard and a computer and a vocal mic, and that's all you get. You know, the show would be sort of ready. So it serves 2 purposes, I suppose.
It does, yeah. Although that would never happen. I'd never accept a gig where I'm not allowed to take this with me.
Good for you. Okay, right. I could say, so in that situation, you know, something breaks, you've still got those moves, or at least some, you know, you've got some semblance of it. You can't, you know, if you're doing real-time tweaks on stuff, you know, aside from recording the entire performance and having it there.
Which is what I have done. Right. Which is what I have done in the past. It's really time-consuming, but the thing is, once it's all done, that just frees
until you decide to change the arrangement.
Until you decide to change
the
arrangement.
Or change the key, or,
Which is what the guy said before the last gig. It's like, we want to do 5 new songs. So it's, you know, and there's just so much work that goes into it. But yeah.
But I can see that, so that's actually an easy transition from what you're running live to if something breaks, you're covered.
Yeah.
Rather than bringing another Moog or another whatever with you. I mean, that's the simplest kind of get out of jail way of doing it.
What I might do is just show you. Let's have a look.
While that's loading, I mean, this is a really big document. You know, how long does it take to load? What sort of memory sort of conditions is it running under? I mean, have you got a lot of stuff going on?
I mean, obviously, you know, when you're running live, you want to, you know, if you've got the option to access like Wi-Fi or anything like that, you need to turn that off, or, you know, you could need to just tweak your computer's settings to...
So that all the real-time CPU goes to the
to live. This is another thing that you could potentially do. So I recorded this so that Maz could practice down in London. It's like you record a performance, and then you could potentially play that performance back from the arrangement view as well if you wanted to do things that way. That's another way of preparing for disaster. You could also record it just as a stereo mix.
And then at least if you got the file, the worst case scenario, say for whatever reason you can't launch your application, you could at least just press spacebar and play it. And whatever. You know. I mean, this level of sort of drill down into the kind of what if, it is worth paying attention to, because otherwise, you know, you can be at a gig. I mean, we've all seen it. I was at a gig on Sunday, and this band were playing and their USB bus all went wrong and they had to plug the audio interface back in again, and there was a clock mismatch, but nobody really caught it, so it got a bit kind of... So, you know, all of these things in the heat of the moment, which is, okay, let's go, and then suddenly nothing's working. You've got to be able to almost instinctively know what to do so that you're not just left there looking like a goon.
You've got to try and keep that fourth wall up. You don't ever want to look like you're flapping, even if you are. And if you've done all this prep, it's like, you know that you've planned for every eventuality.
At least one of you can get on with it while the rest tell jokes or
yes,
whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah. I guess the other advice to this is if you collect the session and save all, it means that other members of the band, if they're not there, can play the whole thing back without having to have the hardware there, and they can kind of still, you know, improvise to a degree as well, right?
So that's the sort of level of detail of recording anything that's going on here. The other thing that might happen, I suppose, is what happens if MIDI controllers go bang. Let me just load the... Yeah, I've had it before where I've had a keyboard that was powered off the bus, and for the love of God, it just wouldn't mount, and I was like...
Yeah.
And eventually it did, and I thought, right, we need to make provision for this as well. And so you see, there's this extra track in here called Backup, which is just recordings of me playing everything that I need to play, which then can potentially be routed to any of the synths that I need to trigger.
In case your keyboard goes down.
In case my keyboard just doesn't work. So you see all of these clips.
So they've got all channels, so it's just got everything in it that...
It's got what I would be playing on that first track that we heard, but because the clip is deactivated, you know, when I trigger that, we're not going to hear anything.
Right.
If I was to press 0, which just activates and deactivates the clip, what would then happen is, as I press that, it would play through the MIDI that I otherwise would be playing, if that makes sense.
Yes, I see what you mean. So, I mean, there could be something, or you might be having to deal with some other matter, like, you know...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, this has perhaps been quite involved, but it does make sense because all of these things are things that you do need to think about to a degree, because there's nothing worse. There's that moment. There's always that moment when you hit play for the first time and it's like, oh wait, is it going to work?
Yeah.
And then the amount of time it takes to figure out what is or isn't working, and then what you can do about it. And if you can fix all of that on the fly, that's the thing about Ableton, is it's all about real-time performance. Then you kind of, you don't look like a chump.
Yeah, I would say it's more important to do less in terms of live performance and make sure that you get the actual sound to work, you know, in any eventuality. It's more important to do that. It's more important to do that. You know, if you hit play and it sounds amazing, 99% of the people out in the audience, apart from you and me, would go, that's amazing.
I think the only other thing is also, if you were doing a solo show, that's kind of more acceptable. But if the singer's left up front, unable to sing and is the focus of attention, and they're maybe not, you know, the world's best stand-up comedian or storyteller, they're going to feel pretty angry that they were put in that position. So you've got to balance all of those things up, I suppose. Yeah?
Well, that's another thing. So we do, you notice we've got a track here called Maz, and Maz has a few different effects on there. A few different effects.
So that's the real-time processing.
That's the real-time processing.
Of her stuff, right?
That needs tidying up. But anyway, she goes into the front of the interface. If the interface goes down, she obviously won't be heard. So we've got a backup mic plugged into the desk as well, just in case she has to.
Right.
You know.
And she misses the finesse of that.
Start telling jokes.
You know. But at least she can. Right.
Yeah.
Tom, that's a very. I mean, there's a lot of stuff there, but I think it's an important thing to cover. And I think you know that trick with the input and monitoring system is something I'd not considered before. So that's a real good one.
You just got that real time being able to switch, and it's not ideal, but
it's better than off.
Yeah, it's better than off, and it does take ages to sort of fully plan it all out, but once it's done, it's just a weight off your mind. Great.
Well, that's it for this one. A bit longer than the last ones, but I think there's a lot of really useful information in there. So thanks again to Tom for coming, and thanks very much for watching. Stay tuned. There are other episodes to this series. See you next time. Bye.